year 2024 almost coming to an end. What that means is Black Friday deals. So I'm sure that you guys have bought some of the computer parts during the Black Friday deals, and if you're trying to put them together to build them for a new computer, and hopefully this video can walk you through or somewhat give you a guidance on how to do that. Alright, so let's go ahead and introducing what I have here on the table. I have the AMD processor. This is the 7000 series. I'll be using a M.2 SSD drive. This is a 4 terabyte. Here I have DDR5 RGB RAM from Corsair. The motherboard I'll be using would be the Asus X670E plus Wi-Fi. So that is the model, the second generation for this motherboard. Here I have the 1000 watt power supply from Corsair. It's a modular power supply. Bought extra fans for the case. The desktop case that I'll be using is the NZXT. Definitely need extra fan if you are hardcore gaming. I'll be using the liquid freezer cooler. This is the 360's Black Arctic water cooling system. So you can use a regular fan, but in this build I'll be using the water cooling for this purpose. And last but not least, I'll be showing you the graphics card. Here I have the Asus Turf Gaming graphics card. I know everyone has their own preference, but this fits within the budget and I'll be using this for the build. Okay, let's get started. Let's take a look at the motherboard. Extra cable for 2.5 inch or 3.5 inch hard drive, HDD or SDD. Some of these are extra screws for mounting the M.2 SSD drive. Manual. Stickers. Asus warranty claim and whatnot. Alright, so definitely I don't need any of those for now. And here is the Wi-Fi antenna that you can stick it into the motherboard for wireless. This has the Wi-Fi built into it. So a lot of the build at the beginning I like to preset. So at the beginning I like to preset the motherboard before I transfer it to a computer, to the desktop. Okay, so the next step is to start installing the RAM. So here, I would like you to pay attention to the RAM slot. If you take a look at the RAM slot, it would tells you that you have the, maybe put it this way, it's easier. Alright, on the motherboard, it would define A1, A2, B1, B2. If you're running on 2 RAMs, you need to install on A2, B2. That would be your first RAM slot, meaning that the A2 would be on a gray and then the B2 would be at the very bottom. Only if you're running on 2 RAM sticks. I'll be using 4 RAM sticks. I'll be using all the slots, so it doesn't matter. Now I just wanted to point it out to you again. The RAM has a gap on it. So if you can see, when you slide into the slot on both sides of it, you can see that the RAM gap, I'm referring to this gap here, has to match to the slot. You see that it's going to go down and match to the slot. Okay. But if you have it on the other way around, what happens is that the gap does not match into the slot. It's just a tiny fraction off of the gap, like 3 pins off of the gap. So what you have to do is to go to make sure you match into the gap before you press it in. I like to press it in on both sides of it so that the RAM slot can click and lock it in. Alright, here are the 4 RGB DDR5 RAM stickers installed. Let's move on to the next, would be the CPU. Here I have the AMD Ryzen 7 series. Now at this point, you want to pay very close attention to the CPU. There's a tiny little arrow that's pointing to the top left corner. And if you take a look at the bracket, there's a tiny triangle pointing top left corner. So you want to match that triangle to that direction, meaning that you would match the seating on the CPU slot. There we go. You can see that there's a little gap right there, and that gap is to match us up the CPU slot on that side. Close it down and lock it in. Press all the way down and then push it in for that little clipper to hold it. Alright, we are done most of the part. Let's work on the M.2 drive. I'll be using the 4 TB M.2. It comes with a tiny little screw here. Before I can install, each motherboard has a different slot for the M.2 drive. You want to check and refer to the motherboard manual. So for mine, you'll be using the PCIe 5.0. I'll be using this slot here. This metal bracket acts as a heatsink, meaning that it helps to cool off the M.2 drive. So in order for you to install it, definitely you need to remove the bracket, and always at the bottom of it, you're going to see the thermal pad. This is where the plastic has to be peeled and have a good contact to the M.2 drive. First, we need to install. Make sure you match the slot to the hard drive. Slide it down at 45-degree angle to the right. Close it down. And here is the thing that you can turn it around to lock it in. So let me do that again for the M.2 drive. you have this little clipper that turn left and right, which holds down to the hard drive. At this point, hard drive is sliding at 45-degree angle. Once it's in, you push it down, turn it around to lock it in. Once the thing is locked, go ahead and install the bracket back into the motherboard. Once you aligned it correctly to the screws, go ahead and lock it in. And once it's locked, you would have the thermal pad contacts to the M.2 for the cooling system. So the next part, I'll be removing the bracket here. Instead of using the default heatsink, I'll be installing the water cooling. So the water cooling has its own bracket for this. So before I transfer the motherboard onto the desktop case, it is easier to remove the bracket here and get it ready for the transfer to install the water cooling system. All right, so that would be the bracket. It looks like it's already pre-mounted to the motherboard. I'll just leave it as is. Now I'm trying to get ready to do a bit of a transfer here over to the desktop case. So let me put this thing aside. Okay, I'm ready to move this here on the side, and I'll be bringing the desktop case here. Is the NZXT. Let me open up the side panel. So one of the things I'd like to mention is, if you're planning to have a full-size water cooling system, please get a full-size desktop case instead of a mid-size. The water cooling definitely take up a lot of space, and of course, if you have a small desktop case, it is very hard to work with. You have a very limited space to go in and out. So that is my advice. Please go with a full size, a very large desktop case if you're planning to have a full size. Why would they tie it so tight? Water cooling system. Okay. Kind of quickly walk you through what are these. USB for the front of the case, just an extension cable for that. You have the audio speaker to plug it in the front of the desktop case. This is probably the CPU fan, not CPU fan, the intake fan from the front. That is your front panel, which allow to have your hard drive lighting, power switch, reset switch, and whatnot. These are all the controller from there, and that is the RGB light. Not extra, these are the screws that you need to mount the motherboard. Alright, I'll be installing the motherboard now. let's find the right screws. A lot of time people will mix match the screws using the wrong screws for the motherboard. Hexagon, this is not what we want. Standoff screw, that's not what we want. Water cooling, this is for the fan 10mm. Screw M3 5mm, and screws 32 5mm. So we'll be using this screw here for the motherboard. Just a recap, 6-32 5mm. These are the screws for the motherboard mounting. Now here is the motherboard, and to mount it, what you want to do is align the back, which all the USB port and the auxiliary jack have to be facing the back of the desktop. So we slide it in first while still holding down the motherboard. I like to lift it up gently, make sure that I have the position in place. So one of the way to look at it is make sure that you have that in the center of the motherboard, and also the mounting bracket, the screws that is going to go in, make sure that they are matched to the desktop. Okay, same goes into that one, that hole, and that hole. Make sure they all fit in nicely. Phillips screwdriver. So just install all the screws here to mount to the motherboard. Okay, once it's done, I'll be moving on to the next step, is to install the power supply. What I need would be very simple and straightforward. First, we need the CPU. All right. We do not need any of the SATA cable. Nothing for the Molex. These are what we call Molex, SATA. We don't need any of the SATA because there's no hard drive installed at this moment. But we do need it for the water cooling. So the water cooling might be running off of the SATA, otherwise would be running off the Molex. So let's keep one each on the side. I forgot to mention that we are running off the water cooling. So the two PCIe here, I wanted to make sure that I have enough power for the graphics card. I'll be using two PCIe cables. And here is the 24-pin cables for the motherboard. These are extra for PCIe, which I don't need them for now. I wonder what this is here. Okay, these are just the two cable management for your for the thing. Okay. Power supply. It doesn't seem like it comes with screws for this, so I'll be using screws coming from the motherboard. Usually they will have screws for the power supply, but that's okay. We have plenty of screws here that we can borrow. So let's put all the cables here on the side. I'll quickly walk you through the power supply. What are the things you need to install first? So this is a modular power supply. Depending on the need of your motherboard, you may have more hard drives than I do. So to install the motherboard, the 24-pin connector, the big one, you'll be installing here on the side. You can see that this is separated on both sides, so that goes to the power supply, and here goes to the motherboard. So just push it in until the thing locks. Okay, so there's a clicker right here. The clipper has to be clipped in and lock it in. What I have here is PCIe. So the PCIe have 6 pins, and there are 2 pins here on a separate, which can allows you to join it together, become 8 pin. For certain graphics card, it's a 8 pin. Some of them are 6 pin, so that's why they have these 2 pin being detached. But the end of this, let's say type 4, the one that has you cannot detach, that has to go into the power supply. So here, the 8-pin connector is a CPU or PCIe. This entire slot would go into the power supply. And here I have the Molex cable. Some of them are connect for the water cooling, some of them are connect for extra CPU fans and whatnot, so you may need this just in case. So for this reason, I'll be connecting it to the SATA at the very bottom here. It's only running off the 6 pin here. Same things that go with the SATA cable. SATA cable here has a 6 pin, and that is the SATA for, could be for the fan or water cooling. I have a CPU, so this CPU identified as to go into the motherboard. As you can see, the 8-pin connector, and here it says type 4. Okay, and usually the CPU 4-pin and 8-pin connector is detachable, meaning that you can slide this thing off. Yep, there we go. You can see that it came off. So some motherboard only runs on a 4-pin, and some of them that requires 8-pin. Depending on which motherboard that you have, just gonna join them back together. So when it says type 4, that's where you need to plug it into the power supply. Okay, I think I need one more PCIe just in case the graphics card need to have two of the all right, there we go. We already have this configured. We are transferring the power supply to the desktop case. Okay, let me move that aside. I know it's hard to show, but the desktop case is right here at the very bottom. I have already maxed out my space. I can show it to you every. Okay, there you go. So on this side, we're gonna slide it in on into the case. But first, let me get ready with some screws that I need to borrow. So we'll be using the hexagon 6-32 6mm. We have 4 of them, so I'll be using that to install the power supply. So the power supply fan, the fan would always facing down to the floor, to the ground. Okay, it has to face down to the ground. That is the exhaust. The heat out shouldn't be facing up. Okay, it should be facing down. At this point here, you want to take a look at the back of your desktop case here and have the screws installed and close it in. Let's see. Alright, so I gotta apologize. Earlier I said that the CPU fan, the power supply fan would have to face down to the ground for the exhaust, but for some reason this casing here and the power supply, the fan has to be facing on the top. It doesn't mount to the right position, so I flip it in around and I was able to say, that the fan is supposed to be facing into the facing the top. So you can see that the fan right there, the fan is facing towards the motherboard. I have no idea why is that. I thought always that the power supply fan is supposed to be facing downwards. So after installing 4 of the screws, you're set with the power supply. Okay, so once the power supply is done, the next step is to install all the cabling, cable management for this reason. .24-pin, I'll slide it here on the very top, the middle part of it. Let me find the CPU here. Here comes the CPU. So I'll be moving along this, the Velcro to the very top, and drop it in here on the very top part of it. Two PCIe, I'll be same, dropping it off right in the center, right here. So pretty much I have already managed them on the side of the cable, just like such. Let me go ahead and kind of Velcro it down. Just like that. Here we can start installing the cables. 24-pin. Install it right here. I think it's too short for the PCIe. I may have to readjust it in a second and readjust the 24-pin, which is a bit too long. Drop it down to the lower bracket. Here is the CPU for the 8-pin connector. I'll be installing it right here. Okay, let me go ahead and reposition again to add more CPU, I believe. What does it say? Trying to say is if there is additional, so 24-pin. PCIe 12-pin 3 SATA 3. So I need to find let me add one more. So readjust this again, which is the PCIe. I'll be dropping it down to the lower part of it, and then goes on top of there. That is the 24-pin cables. I need to add additional CPU 8-pin connector. going to have it moved up. So really the cable management, it is up to individual how you like the way to do it. There's no right or wrong here. Just personal preference, how you manage the cable, make it look nice so it's easier to identify later on. So for the PCIe graphics card, I like it to be one step lower, which is closer to the motherboard, and then the second cable for CPU, I'll be transferred over here and install it back to the very top. Okay, there you go. So as you can see, it is very tight room, not much space to work with. For those of you who has the full size water cooling, it'll be here on the very top. Okay, the PCIe is ready for the graphics card. So the next step, what I'd like to do is to install the water cooling. Alright, so before I start installing the Arctic water cooling, I just want to point it out to you. If you're an Intel CPU user, the Intel CPU require you to remove the bracket, but for an AMD you do not have to remove it, but we did remove earlier the piece that was right here, so we are ready to go for AMD CPU people. But for Intel, you need to remove this metal bracket by using this little guy. Remove it, 1, 2, 3 and 4, replace with the bracket, and continue with the installation. But anyway, we are AMD, so let's go ahead and continue with it. It says AMD here, so these are just pretty much a plastic to kind of lift the gap up higher. So we need to place this thing here like such. It's just like a spacer, the space in between them. And here is the bracket. What you need to do is there's a label that says L for left, R for right, and what it is R is closer to the RAM like such, and then the left is closer to the exhaust fan towards the back of your computer. Got a Phillips screwdriver. Get the screws in ready and tighten it up. Please do not tighten it really tight. Anything that is snug good, I think is enough. This is not how you want to tighten it super tight. There's nothing benefit for tightening it really tight. Okay. Next step is to apply thermal paste. I'll be using the MX6 compound. Just gonna be generous with this. The reason why I say be generous with it, because when you use that little spatula to spread it around, that spatula would actually end up taking a lot of this on the plastic. So be generous with it, because by the time when you spread it around, most of it end up sticking to the spatula. The goal here is not to give it a tiny layer of the thermal paste. The goal of here is to spread it evenly all around the corner, making sure that the thermal paste is having a good contact to every single part of the CPU. Alright, at this point you can see that a lot of them end up on the spatula, so let's just clean it off after or throw it away. Here is where I will be installing the heatsink, the Arctic CPU heatsink. So I'll be facing it on the top, and again, this is the reason why I was telling that when you're going to get the full size of the heatsink, please get a larger case, because this case is just barely fitting. I mean, it fit in very nice and tight and snuggle, but I mean, my point is when I need to troubleshoot something else next time, or maybe like install some of the wiring to the motherboard. Let's just say that you install this and you're like, oh, I forgot to connect the wire, right? They're supposed to connect the pump, the fan to that. How do I get there? Now you have to remove everything out, and it's really tight. And again, this is your first time doing this, and if it's the first time doing it, you probably miss out all these connector for the fan, the lighting and whatnot. So you probably end up removing this in and out all the time, and by the time you realize, you may have damaged the motherboard or something like that. So again, please do not buy a tiny CPU case for a large heatsink. I mean, just my observation. Okay, things would happen. Like sometimes you forgot to put this thing in, and oopsie, redo it again, right? So wasting a lot of time, that's not a good sign. So here, let's take a look. It says pump, VRM, and fan. So what we need to do is just connect all three of them. I can't really see it. Let me go move it around. Alright, so the Arctic does come with a different type of a connector here. One is all-in-one, so meaning that there's only one output and you connect this to the pump. And the other one is individual connection, which allows you to adjust the speed and whatnot. Let's take a look at the motherboard. I have a CPU fan right here, all-in-one pump right there. I can't really see it. And CPU. So pump is right in the middle. I'll be using the pump right here in the middle. Connect that. Fan. Fan goes to the fan here at the very... Wait. You know what? I'll do the CPU fan here. I apologize for that part. And the VRM would be at the very top here. I wonder why I can't install DVR 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, instead of that, I'll be installing it on a system fan. For some reason, I'm not able to install it, so let me push it all the way down here under the system fan all the way to the bottom. And this cable here will be installing onto the CPU palm. Okay, at this point, make sure you peel this thing off and peel this one off as well. Just so you know, the cable is pretty stiff. Just realigned it, position like such. If you notice that the way I doing it is I turn little by little on one side, and I'll come back here to the other screws and come back and turn the rest of it. So the question is, why do I do that? Well, because if you're going to turn all the way in on one side, and then by the time you turn in on this part, what happened is that more likely the thermal paste would have been pushed all the way to the right if you start out with one side. So what the goal is to install both sides simultaneously to push it down so that you kind of like stay in the middle. That's my theory of that. Okay, now you just have to mount the water cooling here on the very top. But before you do that, let's go ahead and install this here. That cable here is going to be installed on the side of here, which is the side of the CPU right here. Install that. Now I kind of regret too tiny of a space. I should have installed before I push it in. Otherwise I need to remove it and install. Yep, looks like I was able to do it. Let me double check again. Get a plastic prying tube, push it all the way in. Okay, I think I got it at the first try. Now finally all you have to do is to get the Arctic, peel the plastic off and slide it in. So it's a magnet. The thing will just lock in by itself, and there you have it. All you have to do is just come back and get a twist tie or whatnot, just to do some cable management to manage up this extra cable that is sticking up here. Okay, let me do that for now. Okay, last but not least, I'll go ahead and finish up the graphics card. That would be the last thing I need to do, and the rest of it will just cable management and Windows installation. So this is the graphics card, and so make sure you peel off all the plastic here before you turn on the computer or you start installing it. And again, at the very beginning, I was installing a different PCIe connector. I did not check my graphics card that uses this. So now I have to rechange the PCIe. But you get the picture. To install the graphics card, it's pretty straightforward. Let's remove all this plastic here. And then go ahead and install by sliding it in at the angle into this slot here. Okay. Let me peel off all the plastic, because you definitely need to do so, otherwise it would generate a lot of heat. You do not want that to happen. Peel it off. And here comes the front. Let's do some peeling here. Okay, once you're done with that, remove the bottom part of the connector as well as this plastic covering up the logo. And let's install it here. I wonder why it's not going in. What's going on? What is not right? Okay, there you go. Once it's installed, grab the screw, tighten it up. In the back here, Okay, so the graphics card is installed. It's all ready to go. And again, I apologize for the beginning because I thought that they uses the regular PCIe, so I need to change this one up. And they use the different one, which is right here. I need to change this connector PCIe to the graphics card. So that should be it. Once I change this thing out, I'll re-manage the cables, and I think this is it. So I know the video is super long. Apologize for that. This is the build from start to end, and hopefully you like it. And if you have any question, comment down below. Thanks for watching. Until next time, bye now.